The euro has fallen to a 5-month low against the dollar as concerns over Italy's next government weigh on sentiment. Fears around the populist party's spending policies and Eurosceptic stance has superseded optimism that the ECB may be heading toward the end of its quantitative easing policy. Valdis Dombrovskis is the European Commission Vice President for the Euro and Social Dialogue, and he joins us now from Brussels for an exclusive interview. Very good to have you with us once again on Bloomberg Television, Commissioner. Can I ask you, how concerned are you about the budgetary plans that you've heard so far from this new Italian administration in waiting?
Well, actually, just today we will issue new country-specific recommendations to all EU member states, including Italy, where our message is that Italy should continue with responsible fiscal policies, putting and continuing to reduce both budget deficit and public debt. And of course, that would be then the basis for the discussion also with the new Italian government.
Commissioner, very good morning. It's Manis in Dubai. From everything that you've seen and heard thus far, does what's happening in Italy and the policies that have been promised rekindle an existential threat to the euro?
First of all, we must respect the constitutional process in Italy, and the formation of the government is still ongoing. So we are not jumping at the conclusions at this stage. What we are doing, we are reiterating our message of the necessity to continue with prudent fiscal policies, especially in a case of Italy, which has second highest debt to GDP ratio in the EU.
So your message is that they need to act on fiscal policy. They need to have responsible fiscal policy. Valdis, what you've heard so far, does it look responsible?
Indeed. Well, once again, as I said, we are not ready to jump at conclusions at this stage, as the formation of the government is still continuing. And first, of course, we need to have direct discussions with the new government before we come to some conclusions. So today we'll be issuing country-specific recommendations, and also in a case of Italy, there will be recommendations how much for next year it should reduce its budget deficit.
Valdis, one of the things that obviously has been the core of this potential new administration in Italy has been about pushing back against some of the legislation that has been enacted, which is structural reform within Italy. Is this also a big risk for you to consider, that this new administration will push back against discussions on EMU reform?
Well, first of all, as regards structural reforms, it's worth noting that structural reforms are needed in many member states. Also in a case of Italy, which is having issues with very slow productivity growth. So there are plenty of bottlenecks which needs to be addressed in Italy's economy, actually, to strengthen economic growth. So this is reflected also in our today's documents.
The ECB has not said much publicly, or they've said that they are watching the situation. You, of course, are concerned about the euro and looking after the currency, Valdis. What should the ECB be doing? Are you talking to them about things that could be done?
Well, as regards ECB, of course, it's worth noting that ECB is independent institution, so it takes its decisions themselves. But ECB's mandate is very clear, and it's primarily driven by price stability and targeting inflation at close to but below 2%. And those are basically the parameters which determine ECB's monetary policy.
Just to continue with that theme, Valdis, from Anna's question, Mario Draghi once said he'd do whatever it takes to secure the euro and stepped into the breach. If the risks rise, if the yields blow out, if the spreads blow out, if the yields rise in Italy, would you support that sentiment from the ECB to do whatever it takes to keep the euro intact?
Well, first of all, just to reiterate, ECB is an independent institution, so it takes its own decisions. It doesn't have to ask permission from European Commission if you want. But then, as regards the current economic circumstances, it's worth noting that currently we are in very different economic circumstances. We are not in a crisis. We are in a 6th year of economic growth. All EU member states are back to the economic growth, and we rather should be looking how we strengthen the resilience of the economy to face potential future shocks. And that's what we are currently concentrating on, and that's the approach that also ECB is taking.
On another matter, Valdis, of course, we look ahead to next week when the exemption for the EU around metals tariffs runs out. How do you look at the trade disputes with the United States at the moment? Are you hopeful that that some kind of agreement can be reached so that metals tariffs are not applied by the United States to Europe?
Well, as you know, we have concerns in this area, and discussions with U.S. authorities are continuing. But what we are also emphasizing is that currently we had already 2 temporary extensions of those additional tariffs. But what we are emphasizing is that actually we need a permanent solution to this problem, so EU being permanently exempted from those tariffs, and then we can discuss trade measures. We are open to discuss trade measures, including reciprocal improvement of the market access for both sides.